The room buzzed with fake laughter, sharp whispers, and the kind of smiles that cut deeper than knives. At the dinner table, every cousin, aunt, and uncle glanced at him with pity or sneer, calling the young black boy poor, weak, and unworthy. He quietly nibbled his food, feeling every insult pierce his heart, while they boasted about wealth, education, and luxury. He remembered the long days of struggle, the worn shoes, the empty pockets, and the nights he cried silently alone. None of them suspected that the boy they mocked with such arrogance carried more courage, humility, and intelligence than anyone in that room. They did not know that one day, after the grandfather's death, he would sit in the same room, calm and composed, while the lawyer revealed a truth so shocking that the laughter and mockery would vanish forever, leaving only disbelief and regret in their greedy eyes. The young boy had always felt like an outsider in his own family, walking quietly through rooms filled with whispers and judgment. His life was a constant struggle, with torn clothes, empty pockets, and dreams bigger than the world seemed ready to allow. He learned early to hide his pain behind a calm face, smiling when teased and nodding when insulted. He remembered the nights sitting alone under dim lights, thinking about how unfair life could be, while secretly promising himself that one day he would rise above the mockery and show them his true worth. His grandfather, one of the few who understood him, always reminded him that patience and courage were stronger than wealth or status. Every insult at dinner, every sneer, only strengthened his quiet determination. That he carried a secret hope, one that no relative could imagine, and it was this hope that would turn the tables in ways that would shock everyone and reveal that the boy they looked down upon was destined for something extraordinary. The evening air was thick with tension. Though no one admitted it at the long polished dining table, the young boy sat quietly at the corner, his hands folded in his lap while relatives laughed and chatted loudly, casting glances filled with pity and disdain. That he tried to enjoy his simple meal, but every joke, every snicker seemed aimed directly at him. Aunt Marjorie whispered about his torn jacket, Uncle Henry chuckled at his worn shoes, cousins whispered about how he would never amount to anything in life. He lowered his eyes, swallowing the lump in his throat, feeling a mix of shame and silent anger that burned quietly inside him. He remembered his grandfather's words, "Strength is shown in patience and courage, not words or wealth," and he clung to them like a lifeline. Each insult cut like a knife, but he stayed calm, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Inside, he plotted silently, not revenge but a quiet determination to prove his worth, knowing that one day, the laughter and mockery would turn to shock and respect. Each chuckle, the sharp whispers, the arrogant smiles only strengthened his resolve, reminding him that the world often underestimates those who are patient, humble, and strong. And tonight, as he endured every cruel word, he realized that his moment was coming closer with every passing second, and no amount of mockery could shake the fire burning within him, for he knew that his destiny, hidden from their eyes, was far greater than their arrogance could ever imagine. As he pushed away from the dinner table, the room fading behind him, memories of his childhood surged like a river he could not stop. He remembered the tiny apartment where he grew up, the cracked walls, the single flickering light that barely illuminated the room, and the nights when hunger kept him awake while his mother worked late and his father's absence left silence heavier than grief. He recalled the small jobs he took at 12, selling newspapers, running errands, carrying groceries, anything that could earn a few coins, while classmates laughed at his ragged clothes and worn shoes. Every insult at school, made worse by the whispers of strangers, etched a fire in his heart, driving him to work harder, study longer, learn faster, never show weakness. He remembered the cold winters when he shivered in thin jackets, clutching books that smelled of old paper and dreams. He recalled moments of loneliness so deep that tears came silently, but he refused to give in, holding tight to his grandfather's advice that courage and patience mattered more than wealth or status. He had learned early that life was unfair, but it was not unchangeable. He had learned that the mockery of the world could be endured if one stayed true, focused, and strong. And as the dinner echoes faded behind him, he smiled faintly, because every struggle, every hardship, had quietly built him into someone they would soon be forced to respect. Someone whose strength was invisible to those who judged only by wealth, appearance, and status. Someone who was ready to rise beyond every expectation and turn the tables in ways no one could yet imagine. Among all the harsh voices and cold stares of the family, the boy always found warmth in his grandfather's presence. The old man's eyes sparkled with kindness and understanding that no one else could offer. He remembered sitting on his grandfather's knee, hearing stories of courage, honor, and patience, learning that true strength came from character, not money or social status. The grandfather always believed in him, encouraging him to study hard, work diligently, and never let insults define his worth. "The world may mock you," he would whisper, "but remember, one day they will see your true value." Those words became a shield against humiliation, a light in the darkest moments, reminding him that someone loved him unconditionally and trusted him completely. He recalled the small gestures, the grandfather secretly slipping coins into his pocket to help with school supplies, the quiet encouragement when others laughed at his worn shoes, the gentle hand on his shoulder saying, "You are stronger than you know." Even in his final days, lying weak in bed, his grandfather smiled, proud of the patience and courage the boy carried silently. He felt a deep bond, an unspoken promise that he would honor this love and trust, and as he remembered those moments, the boy realized that the respect and admiration of others were temporary, but the lessons and love from his grandfather would guide him to a destiny far greater than anyone in that room could imagine. As the boy returned home from his grandfather's room, he noticed the relatives whispering, smirking, and exchanging knowing glances, their arrogance filling every corner of the house. Aunt Marjorie flaunted her expensive jewelry while sneering at his plain clothes. Uncle Henry boasted about his business deals, casting subtle insults under the guise of humor, and the cousins laughed at the boy's quiet demeanor, calling him lazy and unambitious. They believed money measured character and judged him as if he were invisible, not realizing that true strength could never be bought. Each comment, each glance was meant to diminish him, to remind him of his poverty and status. But the boy sat silently, his mind focused, his heart steady, carrying the lessons of patience and courage that his grandfather had instilled in him. Though outwardly calm, inside he analyzed every word, every gesture. Knowing that arrogance and pride often blind people to reality, he understood their obsession with wealth, how it twisted their minds and fueled cruelty, yet he felt no hatred, only determination. He realized that this arrogance would be their weakness, that one day the same people who mocked him would face a shock they could not comprehend, and he would rise not with revenge, but with quiet dignity, showing that respect, patience, and strength could never be taken lightly, no matter how loudly someone shouted about riches or status. The boy sat by his grandfather's bed, holding his frail hand as the steady rhythm of life grew weaker with every breath. The room smelled of medicine and memories, filled with silence heavier than any words could carry it. He remembered every lesson, every gentle smile, every whispered word of encouragement as his grandfather's eyes closed slowly, trusting him with a future that seemed impossible to anyone else. The relatives gathered quietly, pretending to mourn, their faces masks of sorrow that hid greed and curiosity, all thinking of inheritance before love. They whispered about the will, the money, the estate, comparing fortunes and imagining control over what they believed was theirs by right. The boy's heart ached, but not with anger. It ached with love and gratitude for the man who saw his worth when no one else did. He pressed a soft kiss to his grandfather's forehead, feeling a mix of grief and determination, knowing that the lessons of patience, courage, and integrity would guide him now more than ever. He rose from the bed, eyes steady, carrying an invisible strength that would soon challenge every assumption, upend every arrogant plan, and prove that the boy they had mocked was destined for a destiny far greater than the greed and pride of the family could ever imagine. The lawyer's office was filled with tension, each relative shuffling nervously in their seats, eyes flicking toward one another, expecting wealth, drama, and confirmation of their imagined superiority. The boy sat quietly, hands folded, heart steady, not daring to hope but silently bracing for what was to come. Lawyer cleared his throat, opening the thick leather-bound folder, the sound echoing in the silent room. Every eye was on him, the cousins whispering, friends and distant relatives leaning forward, anticipating the fortune they believed was theirs. The boy's mind wandered briefly to his grandfather's smile, his words of patience and courage, finding strength in those memories. He listened carefully as the lawyer began to read, the calm voice contrasting sharply with the rapid heartbeats in the room. The details of property, businesses, and savings were mentioned one by one, each relative's face lighting up with greed, expectation, pride, and arrogance. All eyes occasionally flicked toward the boy, thinking he would be disappointed, ignored, or overlooked, not realizing that the moment approaching would shatter every assumption and redefine the measure of wealth, honor, and respect in ways they could not yet imagine. And in that silent tension, the boy felt a quiet thrill, knowing that patience, humility, and strength, not loud words or riches, would soon turn the entire room upside down. Every second stretched endlessly as the lawyer's voice continued, the room filled with silent anticipation, hearts racing, and eyes darting nervously. The boy sat still, hands folded, listening intently, feeling the tension coil like a spring ready to release. Each mention of property, bank accounts, and family heirlooms made the relatives lean forward with greedy expectation, whispering about how they would divide it, not noticing the quiet determination in the boy's eyes. The lawyer paused briefly, clearing his throat, a subtle tension rippling through the room as everyone held their breath, waiting for the part that would define their fates. Each whisper, the shuffled papers, the nervous coughs, the tapping of fingers on polished wood heightened the suspense, and the boy's heart beat steadily. Anchored by the lessons of patience and courage his grandfather had instilled in him, he could sense the arrogance and greed of the room, how they underestimated him, thinking their mockery, expectation, and wealth gave them control. However, he felt a quiet thrill knowing that the next words would change everything, turn arrogance into shock, and reveal that the person they had dismissed, ignored, and belittled was about to redefine the measure of power, honor, and respect in that very room, leaving disbelief and awe in the eyes of those who had thought themselves untouchable. Then the lawyer paused, long enough to make every heartbeat loud in the room, then spoke clearly, "The entire estate, property, and fortune of your grandfather is left to you." His eyes meeting the boy's calm, steady gaze for a brief second. The room froze, silence heavier than any word, faces draining of color, cousins swallowing harsh laughter, aunts and uncles blinking in shock and disbelief. That no one had expected this. Not the arrogant whispers, not the boasts, not the imagined certainty of wealth. All eyes were on him, the boy who had sat quietly, mocked and belittled, now the sole heir to everything they desired. The boy felt a rush of emotion, tears welling not from greed but from gratitude and disbelief, his grandfather's lessons of patience, courage, and integrity echoing in his heart. He remembered every insult, each harsh word, and realized that none of it mattered now, for respect and honor had replaced humiliation in the most unexpected way. Every greedy glance and mocking whisper turned to stunned silence, faces pale, hearts racing as the boy smiled softly, knowing that the arrogance, pride, and mockery of the family would never be the same again. He had endured, he had been patient, and now, the world they tried to diminish him with had become the stage for his triumph. The twist of fate that proved that true wealth is measured not by money but by strength, character, and the quiet courage to endure, believe, and rise above every insult and assumption. The room erupted with a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief, voices rising in panic and frustration, faces red with embarrassment and outrage. Cousins shouted about unfairness, aunts gasped, turning pale at the revelation, uncles demanded explanations, questioning the lawyer, challenging the validity of the will, all their arrogance crumbling in front of the quiet boy who now sat calmly, listening with steady eyes and a composed heart. Every insult they had hurled at him, every whisper and sneer, returned in the form of stunned silence and regret. They could not understand how the boy they dismissed, ignored, and mocked had become the rightful heir to everything they craved. Eyes that once judged and belittled now darted nervously, searching for loopholes or errors, while the boy felt a strange mix of pity and triumph, realizing that patience, courage, and integrity had won where pride and greed had failed. He remembered his grandfather's words and felt their truth deeply. The boy's quiet endurance and humility had become his strength, and while relatives shouted, questioned, and plotted, he remained composed, smiling softly, knowing that the lesson was clear. Mockery, arrogance, and greed never define destiny, only character, courage, and the ability to endure adversity lead to triumph, and in that moment, he understood fully that he had not only inherited wealth, but also the respect, admiration, and awe that could never be taken away by arrogance or pride. The boy stepped out of the lawyer's office, feeling a mix of exhilaration, relief, and quiet. Pride that he had endured years of mockery, struggle, and humiliation, but now he stood as a man transformed, carrying not just wealth, but a sense of purpose and dignity that no one could take away. His journey from a poor, mocked child to the rightful heir was not defined by money alone, but by the patience, courage, and humility that had guided him through every hardship that he walked past, relatives still grappling with shock, the whispers of envy and regret following him, realizing that their arrogance and greed had blinded them to true strength. The boy smiled softly, thinking of his grandfather and the lessons that had shaped him, understanding that wealth was meaningless without character, and that triumph lay in rising above insult with grace and integrity. He vowed to use the fortune wisely, to honor his grandfather's memory, and to prove that power should be tempered with kindness and wisdom. The world he once feared and despised now awaited his choices, his actions poised to inspire respect, rather than feared. He had become more than an heir. He had become a symbol of endurance, courage, and the quiet strength that comes from surviving humiliation and emerging stronger, ready to face any challenge with a heart guided by wisdom, humility, and the knowledge that true victory is measured not by riches, but by character, integrity, and the courage to rise above every obstacle life places in one's path. As the sun set behind the city, the boy looked at the life that had once mocked him and felt a quiet triumph deep within his soul. He had endured insults, poverty, and cruelty, but every hardship had forged strength, humility, and courage within him. Now, with wealth in his hands and wisdom in his heart, he realized that true victory was not in the fortune, but in the patience and integrity that had carried him through years of doubt and scorn. The relatives who had laughed at him now stared in silence, unable to undo the lessons life had taught him, while he walked forward, calm, strong, and unshakable, ready to honor his grandfather's love and guidance. He understood that destiny rewards those who endure, those who rise above mockery with grace, and those who hold on to hope when the world seems cruel. And as he took a deep breath, he knew this was only the beginning of a life shaped by courage, character, and the unyielding belief that even the humblest soul can rise to greatness and command respect that money alone can never buy.